Hello everyone, my name is Aaron. Thank you for being here. I am a little bit dressed down today. That is only because I just got my second Fauci ouchie, so pardon my appearance. I, like many other art hoes, have always been a fan of the Fall Raven Ken backpack. In fact, I have two of them. But after doing some late night reconnaissance on the Fall Raven website, I regret to inform you all that the only purple bag they have is lavender. Editor's note, a Fall Raven Can bag in a more acceptable shade of purple does actually exist, just not as a mini bag for some reason anymore. You can still buy them on other sites though, so needless to say, I will be buying one at some point. Alright, now back to the video. Which, you know, if you like lavender, that's great. That's fine. Totally fine. I don't really care for lavender. As a purple connoisseur, which is what I call myself so that I don't feel bad about hoarding random purple items with little to no use to me. But anyway, I basically decided that if there wasn't a purple backpack out there that I thought was right, that I would make it myself. So I found this pattern on Etsy from I Think So Bags, and when I saw it, I was like, ooh, that's a cute bag. So I decided to give it a shot. And the pattern itself looked easy enough. So once I had purchased and downloaded the pattern, it was time to do my favorite pandemic activity, look for multiple different types of fabrics on fabrics.com. Hashtag not sponsored. Hashtag would gladly accept a sponsorship. So I found this purple fabric, which I think is going to be really, really nice, and I decided to use this black version of the same fabric for the front pocket. I also got this really, really cute Halloween print quilting cotton to make the inner lining. Also, I got some fusible interfacing, some bias tape to bind the raw edges, new needles for my machine, etc, etc, etc. Once I got everything in the mail, which took about 2 weeks or so, I was ready to print out the pattern and start assembling. Before we begin, I just want to go through a little bit of the terminology I'm going to be using in case you're a first-time sewer. So the nicer side of the fabric that you would want to face outward when you finish your project is called the right side, and the fabric that would face inside, or maybe you wouldn't even see at all, is called the wrong side of the fabric. Get it? Got it? Good. I started by cutting out the pattern pieces and reading through the instructions a few times, just to get my bearings. Then I started with cutting out the fabric pieces, pinning the pattern to the fabric and cutting around them, being mindful that a lot of these pattern pieces are meant to be cut on the fold. Now, I needed to cut out 2 of most of these pieces, so I sort of just decided to cut out 2 of everything. This wasn't totally necessary for every single piece, but I figured it was better that I had an extra piece for a slightly wider margin of error, just seeing as I've never made anything like this before. Plus, I sort of overbought fabric, mostly because I didn't realize how wide these bolts of fabric were. They're pretty long. But, you know, I think it ended up being a good idea at the end. Then, per the instructions, I started off by constructing the front pocket. This piece does not get any interfacing, so basically what I did first was place the exterior piece of the front pocket zipper panel onto the smaller zipper. Now, this pattern has a longer zipper for the top and a smaller zipper for this, and then an even smaller zipper for the inner pocket. So there are multiple zippers. I placed the exterior piece of the front pocket zipper panel onto the smaller zipper, right sides together, and then stitched it into place. Then I did the same thing with the lining piece and flipped both of them so that the wrong sides were together and pressed the seam down. Then I pinned the outside gusset piece onto this assembled zipper panel, right sides together, and sewed up the short ends to attach it. I did the exact same thing with the lining and then flipped it all right side out so that it looked like a circle. Next, I basted the exterior front pocket piece to the lining. I don't typically like to baste things just because I'm not great at it, and I think it's a little time consuming. And also, I've kind of decided I hate hand sewing, but the pattern called for it, so I figured I would do it, and it did actually end up making things a little bit easier in the end. So, you know, I guess for this type of project, I'd recommend it. Then I sewed the assembled zipper and gusset pieces to the front piece with right sides together. And when you turn it right side out, it looks like this. The last thing I did on day 1 was iron all of the fusible interfacing onto the purple pieces. Then I pinned the front pocket to the front piece of the backpack and decided I would pick this up on the next day. So day 2, I kind of realized that the presser foot on my machine is a little bit too big for this pocket, and something is going on with my bobbin. So I sort of decided to hand sew the pocket on. This may not have been the best decision, but I think it was a little bit easier in the end than trying to wrestle with my sewing machine, even though it was a little bit more time consuming. So this is one of the parts where I kind of messed up a little bit. Because I wanted to get things ready for the next day, I tried to do a bunch of prep work on the end of day 2 so that day 3 wouldn't take me quite as long. But in doing this, I kind of deviated a little bit from the instructions. I ended up attaching all of the lining pieces to the exterior pieces that they corresponded with. It looks a little funny on the inside because you can see some of the stitching, but I think at this point it's functional and I don't really care otherwise. But yeah, definitely not what the instructions said to do. I also took this time to assemble the lining pocket, which seemed complicated, but was actually pretty straightforward once I kind of figured out what the instructions wanted me to do. Basically, you just cut the hole for the zipper in the front pocket piece, cut the same hole out of the lining for the back piece of the bag, and then sew the zipper in between them. Then you basically just sew around the rectangular hole and then again around the pocket with the right sides together. That way there's a solid square with no gaps and a little hole where you can open up the pocket to put things in. This pocket is going to sit between the lining for the back piece of the main backpack and the exterior piece for the back. And the last thing I did to finish up day 2 was to complete the D-ring loops, which again, I thought would be a little more complicated, but it actually ended up being pretty simple. And then I pinned everything into place so it would be prepped and ready to work on the next day. So the final day of this project ended up being the bulk of the construction of the rest of the bag. I started off by attaching the main zipper onto the main zipper panel. Then I took the 2 gusset pieces and sewed them together on the short side, per what the instructions said. Then I attached the assembled gusset to the zipper and zipper panel at the short end, just like we did for the small pocket. I also attached the handle and the 4 D-ring loops to the outside of the back piece. I sewed this really close to the edge so they would be sort of encased in the seam once I flipped it all right side out. This was the moment where I sort of realized my mistake with the lining.
I kinda messed up a little bit.
Because what you're actually supposed to do is sew it in between the lining and the exterior piece on the back, but I don't really think it matters because it all gets encased in bias tape anyway. Now all that was left to do was put it all together. This is all done with the right sides together so that it can all be flipped later. And I started with the front piece because for some reason that seemed easier. Then I went ahead and finished up the back. Now the only thing I had left to do was bind and reinforce the inner seams with the bias tape. Now this was another point where I kind of ran into a bit of a roadblock because I realized that for some reason this pattern doesn't come with a pattern piece for the strap, it just comes with instructions for how to make one. I tried really hard, I really did, but I just couldn't figure out this strap situation. Every time I would try to sew it, my machine would jam. Every time I would try to pin it, I would hurt myself with the pins. So I sort of gave up. I'll probably buy a strap with lobster clips at some point to hook onto the D-rings with, but I think at this point, I'm gonna call this project finished. Here it is in all its tiny backpack glory. It's a little smaller than I thought it would be, but I was going for a mini backpack, so, you know. And then I also added this little piece right here from the lining that I thought was cute. I just happen to like that style when backpacks have a little tag there, so thought I would add it. I do think it's a little wonky in places, like right up here. It kind of isn't quite sewn as close to the edge as it should be. And some stuff with the handles is a little lopsided, but all in all, I'm pretty happy with it and I'll definitely use it, so that's a win in my book. And to be fair, this was the first time I had ever made something like this, so I'm pretty proud of myself for how good it ended up coming out. I do think that if I did this again, I would find a pattern that has a different style of front pocket. Not that there's anything wrong with the way that it looks, I just had a really hard time attaching this one, and I think maybe something with like a flat zipper pocket in the front instead might be a little bit simpler, but I am excited to make something like this again soon, except for the straps. That was literal hell, and I will never make straps again. So that just about does it for this week's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you at least enjoyed watching me struggle, or maybe even learned something, I don't know. Here are my social media handles. You can also find them linked in the description down below. Remember to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and not like this. Also, remember to turn on notifications so you get notified every time that I post. There will be a video next Friday, so make sure you tune in. I will be going through somewhat of a style transformation. Yeah, that's what we'll call it. Trust me, it's for the better. All right, that's it. Bye!